I was halfway through fixing a loose cabinet hinge when my life split down the middle. Ordinary Thursday night. Meatloaf still warm in the pan, a basketball game murmuring on TV, the dishwasher humming like a content cat. I'd gone upstairs to grab my phone from the charger in the hallway, thumb already reaching for it when I heard voices from our daughter's room. Laura's voice, low and serious, our teens answering in whispers. I didn't mean to linger. I was headed past the cracked door when Laura's sentence stopped me like a hand to the chest. He doesn't need to know he isn't your real dad until you're done with college. He'll take care of us. Silence stretched so thin I could hear my own heartbeat. I stared at a framed photo on the wall, our family at the Grand Canyon, sun in our eyes, arms slung around shoulders we trusted. The photo didn't change, but everything behind it did. Our son spoke first, small and worried, the way kids get when the ground shifts under their feet. "Mom, that's not right. He loves us." "I know he does," Laura said, and the impatience in her voice sounded practiced. "That's why this will work. You two will have tuition covered, the mortgage stays paid, and by then you'll be out living your lives. No one gets hurt." I stepped back, the hallway wobbling a fraction. No one gets hurt. I thought about braces, field trips, midnight fevers, science projects spread across the dining table. I thought about the birthdays where I woke early to hang ridiculous decorations, the nights I sat in lawn chairs under bad stadium lights just to watch our daughter chase a ball with joy that could power a city. I thought about how I never missed a parent-teacher conference, not because I'm perfect, but because being their dad was the one job I never phoned in. And then I thought about biology, about a date on a calendar I didn't mark but my bones suddenly remembered. The math lined up in a way that turned my stomach. Our daughter asked a question so soft I almost missed it. "What about him? Like, later?" "Later is later," Laura said, crisp as a snapped pencil. "Right now, we do what's smart." I moved like a person in a fire drill. Quiet, direct, focused on exits. I picked up my phone. My hands didn't shake, which surprised me. I walked downstairs and stood in the kitchen where we keep the pens, the light over the sink turning every surface honest. I stared at the little gouge in the countertop that our son made with a school project knife, and felt something simple and solid lock into place inside me. I texted my friend Ethan. "Can you talk?" He called within 30 seconds, because that's who he is. I told him enough to understand. He didn't fill the silence with, "Are you sure?" or "Maybe there's an explanation." He said, "Come over, now." I didn't. Not yet. I packed. I went to the bedroom and pulled out my old duffel, the one that's seen more ball games and weekend trips than I can count. 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, the folder with our insurance, the deed, the will, a version of my life in paper, my grandfather's watch, the little wooden truck our son carved in 5th grade shop class. I put that in the bag because I needed one thing that wasn't breaking. Laura texted from upstairs. "You okay? Need help with the hinge?" I stared at the message until the words blurred, then typed, "I'm good. Be right back." Lie number 1, and I hated it, but I wasn't going to beg for clarity I already had. I took one last look around the room, the bed we picked together, the chair where I used to rock colicky babies and read email with one hand, her plant on the windowsill, stubborn and reaching. I turned off the light. On my way out, I paused at the family calendar pinned to the corkboard. Dentist appointments, soccer practice, a star next to Dad's chili cook-off. I slipped the marker from its holder and drew one more square around tomorrow's date. No label, just a box, a border around the last day I would spend. Believing the old story, the night air hit me like a fact. I loaded the duffel into my truck and sat with the engine off, hands on the wheel, letting the dark wrap around me without giving it permission to suffocate. Across the street, our neighbor untangled Christmas lights he should have taken down weeks ago. Ordinary kept happening, indifferent to detonations. I drove to a hotel 2 towns over that smelled like lemon cleaner and carpet glue. I booked a room under my middle name. I set the duffel on the chair, sat on the edge of the bed, and called a lawyer. Her name was Patel. A friend recommended her after his own not quite similar disaster. She answered like she'd been waiting for my call her whole career, calm, professional, no judgment. I told her the headlined version. She asked careful questions. Ages, timelines, house title, whose name on which account. When I stopped, She filled the silence with steps. First, she said, you do not confront, you do not accuse, you secure. Freeze joint cards, move your paycheck, and change the passwords you are entitled to change. Second, consider a private paternity test if you want to know, but understand the law in our state. If you're on the birth certificates and you've acted as father for years, biology and legal status aren't the same thing. Third, if you intend to separate, we file methodically. You own the home outright? My name only, I said. Bought before we married, refinanced after, but I never added her. That matters, she said. And finally, if what you allege is true, any scheme to intentionally misrepresent paternity for financial gain is serious. Courts don't like it. We'll discuss remedies. For tonight, sleep if you can. I didn't sleep. I made lists. At dawn, I drove to the bank, opened a new account, and redirected my direct deposit. I froze the joint card to prevent new charges. I called a locksmith and scheduled a rekey for the afternoon, then texted Laura that I needed to be at work early. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Emojis look absurd on mornings like that. At 10, I met Patel in person. Her office was tidy in a way that made me trust her. She slid a legal pad toward me. We go slow to go fast, she said. If this becomes paternity fraud, we document intent. That sentence you overheard, we'll memorialize it in an affidavit, but we'll want corroboration if possible. Do not record your children. Do not weaponize them. We keep them out of the blast zone. They're not my children, I said, and my voice cracked on a word it had always carried easily. She softened. They are the children you raised. That remains true even while we pursue the truth you're owed. I nodded because anything else would have been a sound I didn't want to make. Patel outlined the plan. Separation paperwork drafted but not served yet. Immediate temporary orders to secure occupancy of the home. A letter to Laura's counsel requesting cooperation for paternity testing, framed not as an accusation but as clarity. If she refused, we'd petition the court. She warned me about timing, about how slow the system could be, about the difference between justice and relief. You will want this all to be over yesterday, she said. We will move as fast as fairness allows. On my way out, I signed a stack of documents that felt like sandbags on a riverbank. Necessary. Heavy. I parked 3 blocks from the house and watched from my truck as the locksmith's van pulled up. He worked efficiently. New keys waited in a little paper envelope with my name written neatly across the front. I let myself in with the old key, then handed him the envelope and a tip that said thank you without telling a story. Laura wasn't home. A note on the counter said she'd taken the kids to practice, as if the universe was daring me to shout. I didn't. I placed my old wedding band in the junk drawer, buried under rubber bands, because ceremonial gestures felt cheap compared to the reality breathing in the walls. On the dining table, I set 2 folders, one with the separation packet, unserved, labeled when ready. The other with letters for our teens that said nothing about blood, nothing about courts, just that I loved them and needed space while adults handled adult things. I didn't sign those, not yet. I wasn't going to turn them into messengers for a war they didn't start. I packed a second bag, work laptop, a few tools, the lucky tape measure my daughter once decorated with stickers that say Best Builder. I hesitated, then grabbed the dog-eared paperback my son and I had been reading on the couch. If I couldn't keep a title, I could keep a chapter. The garage door rumbled. Voices, laughter. A thud of gear bags dropped near the mudroom. I stepped into the hallway just far enough to see their shadows stretch across the tile and knew the only clean move left. I walked out the front door without saying a word. On the porch, I paused. The sky was that clear winter blue that looks like it could shatter. A delivery truck rolled by. A neighbor waved. A life continued. I locked the door with the new key, tucked the envelope into my pocket, and kept walking to the truck. At Ethan's, he opened the door before I knocked twice. He took one look at my face and didn't ask how I was. He moved aside and said, "You're staying in the guest room. No arguments." I sat on his couch, stared at the TV without seeing it, and let the day collapse in on itself. When I finally spoke, it came out small. "What if I'm wrong?" "Then you'll be the same man you were yesterday," he said. "And you'll go home. But if you're right, you'll be glad you did this clean." My phone buzzed nonstop that evening. "Laura, where are you? Are you okay? Kids are asking. Please answer." Then, "Why is my card declined?" Then, Did you change the locks? Call me now. I wrote back one sentence. I'm safe. We'll speak through counsel. Her reply came fast and hot, dramatic, accusatory, then quieter, almost pleading. I put the phone face down and let Patel be the voice for everything else. Around midnight, I took out the letters I'd drafted for the kids and rewrote them, shorter, truer. I told them I loved them, that the grown-ups were sorting complicated things, and that they didn't need to fix anything because none of it was their fault. I folded the pages and sealed the envelopes. Tomorrow, I would decide whether to mail them or deliver them to Patel to include with the first official communication. Tonight, I kept them in my bag, close to the wooden toy and the watch. Sleep came in slices. In one, I was at the Grand Canyon again, the wind stealing our hats, the kids yelling into the vastness just to hear echoes answer. In another, I stood in our hallway, a stranger in my own house listening to words that made numbers line up in ways I could never unsee. At dawn, the sky went pink over Ethan's fence. I brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to hold up a table. I checked my list. Bank, done. Locks, done. Counsel, retained. Next steps, serve, test, protect assets, breathe. I thought about revenge and found I didn't want it. Not the movie kind, not the social media kind. What I wanted was simpler. Truth on paper, order restored, a future that didn't wobble when I put weight on it. If there was a word for that, it was justice. Or maybe just dignity. At 8, Patel called. You ready? As I'll ever be. We file today, she said. Occupancy order, financial protections, and a formal request for testing. Keep your communication through me. Be compassionate with the kids if they reach out. No accusations. Facts only. Facts only, I repeated, like a prayer a practical man could say. Before we hung up, she added, whatever the biology says, your character is already on record. I stood at the window with the phone to my ear and watched the neighborhood move through its morning. Trash cans thumped, a jogger waved, somebody warmed up a truck too long. The world didn't look different, but I did. Not harder, not colder. Just awake. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and the letters, and stepped into a day that would start the paperwork of ending a life I once believed unbreakable. Somewhere between the courthouse and the first official email, I decided the last thing I would ever give Laura was the silence she'd asked our kids to keep. She'd wanted quiet while I paid for a story built on lies. I would give her something else entirely. A record. The courthouse smelled like old paper and coffee that had been reheated too many times. When the clerk stamped my documents, the sound felt heavier than it should have. That small, flat thud marked the end of nearly 2 decades of my life, one signature at a time. Patel handed me copies of the filings and spoke in her calm, unshakable tone. These are now official. You have exclusive rights to the property until further notice. Your wife and dependents will be served this afternoon. I stared at the papers, feeling both empty and strangely light. So that's it? She nodded. That's the beginning of it. We'll handle the rest. Next, we'll push for the paternity tests. I thanked her, stepped outside, and let the cold morning air slap me awake. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe, not freely, but deeply enough to know I hadn't made a mistake. At noon, I parked a few blocks away from my house. The mailbox was open, a clear sign the process server had already been there. I didn't go in. I couldn't. Through the living room window, I could see Laura pacing, phone pressed to her ear, one hand tangled in her hair. I imagined the conversation, her mother on the other end, outrage bubbling, trying to paint me as irrational. I didn't stay to watch. Instead, I drove to the lake outside town, where we used to take the kids for fishing trips when they were small. The water was still half frozen, reflecting a sky that didn't care about human heartbreak. I sat on a bench and opened the envelope Patel had given me with the court-stamped papers. The words were plain, professional, cold. Petitioner seeks full possession of marital property pending litigation regarding allegations of paternity misrepresentation and financial deception. Those sentences said everything without emotion. But between the lines, my entire world had burned down. Around 3, Patel called again. She's been served, she said simply. And I've received confirmation from the process server that she refused to speak, only took the envelope and shut the door. Good, I said. What about the kids? They're listed as dependents only. No need for direct contact. We'll wait for her attorney to reach out. In the meantime, I've already filed for paternity testing. Her professionalism steadied me. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for keeping this clean." "That's what you hired me for," she said. "But I'll tell you something off the record, Mr. Carter. You're handling this with more grace than most." "Grace," I repeated with a small, humorless laugh. "Feels more like exhaustion." "Sometimes those are the same thing," she said, then hung up. That night I stayed at Ethan's again. We ordered takeout, neither of us talking much. He poured me a drink, but I stuck with water. My mind was clear. Too clear. I didn't want the fog. At 10 p.m., my phone lit up with a flood of messages from Laura. I didn't open them, but I could read the first few lines of each notification. "How could you do this? The kids are terrified. You're ruining everything. Please just talk to me." I set the phone face down. A few minutes later, another message came from an unknown number. I opened it. It was from my daughter. "Dad, Mom's crying. We don't understand what's happening. Can you please come home?" That one cut deeper than anything else. I wanted to call her, to tell her I loved her, that none of this was her fault. But Patel's voice echoed in my head. "Do not weaponize the children." So I texted back the only truth I could give her. "I love you more than anything. The adults have to fix something important. I'll always be here for you, just not at the house right now. Be good for your mom." She didn't reply. I sat there staring at the phone until the screen dimmed. The next morning, Patel sent me a confirmation email. The court had fast-tracked my motion to establish biological paternity. The tests were scheduled within the week. Laura's attorney had already filed a preliminary objection, but the judge's order was firm. 3 days later, I stood outside the clinic, watching snowflakes settle on the windshield. Laura pulled up 10 minutes late in her SUV, the kids in the back seat. She didn't look at me when she walked inside. Her lawyer trailed behind her, talking fast. The kids looked confused, scared, small. When my name was called, the nurse took a simple cheek swab and labeled it neatly. Procedure over in seconds. Science doesn't care about heartbreak either. That night, I walked the streets near the motel where I'd moved after leaving Ethan's. The city felt strange. Familiar places made foreign by the quiet between people who used to love each other. I stopped at a diner for coffee and overheard 2 guys talking about some local scandal. They didn't know it was mine. That's how fast life replaces you. Days passed. No calls, no apologies. Just waiting. When the results finally came in, Patel called me herself. "Jason," she said, "we have confirmation. Neither child is biologically yours." The words landed softly, like the final snow on a grave. She gave me the next steps: paternity fraud filing, civil damages for financial deception, and a request for reimbursement of child support paid under false representation. Legal, methodical, necessary. But the only thing I could think of was my daughter's text. "Dad, can you come home?" I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone again, until my reflection blurred in the dark screen. Then I took a breath, stood up, and said to myself what needed to be true now. "She took my trust, but she doesn't get my peace," I called Patel back. "File it," I said. "Everything?" she asked. "Everything," I said. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. Because while she'd spent years living behind lies, I'd finally chosen the only thing she couldn't fake: truth. And I was ready to let it do what truth always does: burn quietly but completely. Weeks turned into months, and the silence between us became permanent. The court process moved slowly but steadily. Every document, every notarized form, each line of testimony carving the truth into public record. There was no yelling, no confrontation, just facts, cold and clear as winter air. Laura tried to reach me several times through mutual friends. "She wants to talk," they'd say. "She says it's all a misunderstanding." But there was nothing left to misunderstand. The DNA tests had already spoken louder than any words she could offer. The judge granted my petition for paternity fraud, a phrase that sounded almost clinical compared to the damage it described. He ruled that I was not legally responsible for the children moving forward, and that Laura's deception constituted intentional financial exploitation. I would be reimbursed for years of support payments. The house was officially mine alone. Within a week, Patel arranged for her eviction to be completed. The day the movers arrived to collect her belongings, I didn't go inside. I waited in my truck down the street, watching from a distance. Laura stood on the porch, arms crossed, her eyes scanning the neighborhood as if she still expected me to appear to give in, to forgive. But I didn't. She had built her safety on lies, and now she was learning how heavy truth can be when it finally arrives. When she drove away for the last time, I didn't feel triumph, I just felt finished. Later that week, I met with Patel one last time to close the case. "You did everything right," she said, sliding the final paperwork across her desk. "No shouting, no drama. You let the truth speak for itself." I nodded. The truth was enough. "Most people can't handle that kind of betrayal without burning the whole world down," she said softly. "I almost did," I admitted, but then I realized I'd rather rebuild one. After leaving her office, I drove to the lake, the same one where I'd sat the day I filed for separation. It was spring now, the ice gone, sunlight dancing on the water like nothing bad had ever happened there. I sat on the same bench and watched a father teaching his little boy how to cast a fishing line. The kid's laugh carried on the wind, pure and unbroken. For the first time in months, it didn't hurt to watch. My phone buzzed. A message from my daughter. Short, careful. "I know you're not my real dad, but you'll always be my father. I miss you." Tears blurred the lake into silver. I typed back, "You'll always be my kid. That part never changes." And that was enough. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need Laura to suffer. Life would handle that on its own. What I needed was peace, and I finally had it. By summer, I sold the house and moved 2 states away, into a smaller place near the mountains. Work kept me busy, and on weekends I fished. Some evenings, when the sun dipped low and the world turned quiet, I thought about what I'd lost and what I'd gained. I'd lost lies, illusions, the version of love that depended on ignorance. But I'd gained something rarer: freedom, clarity, and the strength to live without needing closure from someone who never deserved me. The past didn't vanish. It just stopped holding me hostage. And in that stillness, I found something better than revenge. I found peace.